Is gentle parenting a biblical approach? Is there an overlap between progressive theology and gentle parenting? Who is our ultimate authority when it comes to raising our kids? Is it God and His Word or our children and their feelings? Is there a connection between gentle parenting and the growing number of adult children cutting off their parents? Is gentle parenting just another avenue for critical theory to infiltrate our culture? Why does every person, whether or not they are a parent, need to care about the gentle parenting conversation? Well, we're covering all these questions and many more with my guests, Brett and Erin Kunkle of Maven Truth Ministries, in our episode brought to you today by We Heart Nutrition, a family-owned supplement company with high integrity, the absolute highest quality, and Christian values. Take the quiz today to see what supplements might help you in your phase of life by going to weheartnutrition.com. Use my code Alisa for 20% off your first order. All right, we're going to cover a lot of ground in today's episode, and I realize that this can be a bit of a touchy subject. So I want to just say right off the bat that as parents, we are in this all together, and there's no such thing as a perfect parent. But as Christian parents, we are called to teach our kids truth, to raise them in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, as it says in Ephesians 6:4. We're also called to not provoke them to anger, as it also says in Ephesians 6:4, but also Colossians 3:21. So today in the episode, we're going to be pushing back against gentle parenting culture. But I want to say right off the bat that we're not saying that parents should react with an opposite extreme. We should be patient with our kids, love our kids, be encouraging to our kids, but we are also called to discipline our kids. And the reason this matters for everyone is because the way we bring up our kids as a culture will ultimately shape the culture of the next generation. So I want to tell you a little bit about my guests. Brett and Erin Kunkle of Maven are my favorite guides for parenting. They have so much information and resources available on their website, which is maventruth.com. They have things like virtual training. They have a parenting podcast called the Maven Parent Podcast, all sorts of different courses and articles. And they've just come out with a new ebook about gentle parenting and how to go about a more biblical approach. So you can find all of that at maventruth.com. I loved getting to talk with Brett and Erin in this episode as we lay the foundation, and then we respond to a couple of gentle parenting TikToks, and hopefully we show how to think biblically about what is being taught in this very popular parenting technique. Brett and Erin are friends of mine. They are so awesome. So I'll take you now to my conversation with Brett and Erin Kunkle. Brett and Erin, so great to have you back on the show once again. This time we're going to talk about a not controversial at all topic called gentle parenting, which of course is extremely controversial, but you guys are not scared. So you've been talking about this quite a lot, and I've done a little bit of content on this topic. It's less my world than other things, but there's a lot of overlap as we're going to cover. There's overlap between gentle parenting and progressive theology, humanism. It's a really bad theologically inspired movement, it seems. So we're going to talk all about it and break it down. But first, tell us what it is. What are we talking about when we are using the term gentle parenting?
You want to go first or me?
Well, let's wade into this. So this is the challenge from the get-go, right? Is because we're going to define it, and any way we define it, there's going to be some gentle parenting advocate out there that's going to say, no, that's not gentle parenting. So this does make it a little bit challenging, but certainly we can look at this field, we can look at the influencers, we can look at the writing on this, and we can kind of extrapolate certain things that are going to be pretty common amongst gentle parenters that give us the overall gentle parenting philosophy. Yeah. And so that's what we're going to do. Is there somebody out there who's going to say, nope, that's not it? Yeah, that's going to be the case. But it kind of reminds me of years ago when we were trying to define postmodernism. You get the same kind of response. Oh, no, that's not postmodernism.
It's like the word deconstruction, like with the book that Tim and I wrote. It doesn't matter how we define it. You're right. Somebody out there is going to be like, they don't understand what it is. That is not it. It's this thing over here. So yeah, I totally am sympathetic to that challenge.
Yeah, it is actually similar to the deconstruction thing, because I remember when you and Tim came out with the book, a lot of with the book where you would point to videos and things, because a lot of the influence in the deconstruction movement is through social media, YouTube, and all of that. And that is by far how gentle parenting has influenced the culture. The number one way, although there are books and we're going to talk about them, the number one way is through social media. It's TikTok videos, it's Instagram videos. So if you want to think carefully about this topic, which we really have tried to do now for years, you have to wade through all these videos, think about the ideas, find the similarities in and make connections, which most people aren't. When you scroll Instagram, you're not going, oh, wait, what's this idea they just put forward?
Right.
And what's the idea underneath that? And so it is a challenge. There's so many different gentle parenting influencers that it can be difficult. But what we've kind of narrowed it down to is, with the help of some of the books on gentle parenting, it comes down to these four, I guess they call them 4 values or principles. And the 4 principles of gentle parenting are empathy, respect, understanding, and boundaries. Now, those are all words that Brett and I would affirm are important in parenting. And from a biblical worldview, these are really good principles to have as parents: empathy, respect for your child, understanding, and boundaries. These are all really important things. And what we've discovered is you really the devil is in the details. And so it sounds good on the surface, but when you get down to how this practically works out, that's where the problems come.
Now, I don't mean to insult any gentle parenters out there, but it is similar to, I think, talking like with a Mormon, where now, not that the gentle parenters are like Mormons. It's just the discussion is similar in that we will use these terms. We'll use the same language and we will mean different things. So that's where Erin's saying, hey, devil's in the details. We've got to define our terms. Even you take the whole title. I mean, this is, I think, one of the brilliant things about gentle parenting is that they named it something so wonderful that what parent out there does not want to be identified as a gentle parent? I mean, I think almost every parent wants to be identified in that kind of way. And so right from the get-go, they've done a great job in the PR battle by naming it this wonderful name. But then the question is, okay, what does that mean? Empathy, respect, understanding, boundaries. Okay, what do those things mean? And we've got to drill down and look at what those things mean, because then it's going to start revealing to us some of the underlying assumptions. And that's where gentle parenting is challenging for a lot of Christian parents who they hear these things and they think that sounds really good. I want that kind of relationship between me and my child. And now I'm being promised, hey, this is the path forward on that. And so it's very appealing that way.
Is it the kind of thing where, just give me a scenario. One that I could come up with was when my kids were little and I used to take them to the park. I remember there were some kids that were not really all that well behaved. Never mine, of course. Just kidding. But you have kids that get into scraps about things, and then there's kids that'll cut in line and do all the things, and then you have parents like. There was this one time when this boy was hitting my daughter, and they were like 3 or 4 years old. And the mom was just saying things like, Johnny, was that a good choice? Was that a good choice, Johnny? And I'm going, like, maybe you should remove Johnny from the situation, because it was escalating. So is that an example of what that is meant by gentle parenting? Or how far does it go?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the principles of gentle parenting being worked out in real life, because a big principle is that you trust the child and their feelings, and that's kind of your guide as a parent. And so the mom is saying, is that a good choice? Is that a good choice? Now, mom knows it's not a good choice, but you're told not to use words like right and wrong. And so you're just trying to guide them and hopefully nudge their feelings. The problem is Johnny might answer, yeah, Mom, that's a really good choice. This kid is on my last nerve. If we're going to go with Johnny's feelings, that can Johnny might say, no, I guess that's not a good choice. Or he could say, yeah, it is a good choice. Now what do you do? Because you can't use words like, no, Johnny, that was wrong to do. We don't treat other kids that way. It's, oh, you're taught to get down to their feelings, are you upset about something? Oh, this is how we respond when we're upset about something. But again, you don't ever use words like, you shouldn't do that.
Wow.
It's just, this isn't the time and place, maybe. We'll do that another time. We'll find another way to get out our anger. But, and so that's the scenario. And that's why a lot of times when I teach on this topic, especially with young moms, I say, this stuff doesn't work on real kids. It works on the hypothetical Instagram kids. But it doesn't work on real kids. It doesn't work in real life, at the park, at grandma's house, at the birthday parties, in the aisle at Target. Like, this stuff doesn't work with real human children.
And I think that, again, here's going to be the difficulty. Even with what Erin just said, there are going to be people who advocate for gentle parenting who are going to push back and say, no, there's times to identify something is wrong. And again, drilling down deeper, especially, and you've got kind of two audiences here. You have just those who are, secular individuals who advocate for gentle parenting. Then you have Christians who are trying to adopt the aspects of gentle parenting and fit it into kind of their Christian faith. And what you're going to see is that there's going to be some really deep rooted contradictory concepts. And so one of the things in secular gentle parenting you have is this idea that you don't have human beings who are born with a human nature that is fallen and sinful, right? You have people who are born good. In fact, Dr. Becky, one of the big, gentle parenting advocates, has a book entitled Good Inside. And the idea is that you have these children who are morally good inside. They're not fallen creatures. And so oftentimes what happens is the language of right and wrong gets replaced with the language of unmet needs. So it's not sinful behavior. This behavior now is, and this is where the understanding part comes in, of those 4 words, right? So you want to understand what's going on with the child because you want to try to get to the root cause, which is a great idea. But the root cause is not, hey, they're sinful. They have a rebellious heart. No, it's that there's some unmet need, and you as the parent are probably responsible for that unmet need. And so you've got to be the one to figure out what is that unmet need. And this is why you have to be empathetic. And this is why you're respectful and you're looking to, create understanding, which again, you see the appeal here. It sounds good. And yet then when you kind of switch out, when you get down to the details, hey, sinfulness for unmet needs. And now we're not going to correct behavior like what you saw in the park. You don't identify that as sinful. You don't think in terms of consequences and punishment, right? These are passé.
Yeah, actually, a lot of gentle parenters will just say flat out, punishments do not work. Consequences do not work. And you'll hear this even in Christian gentle parenting circles too, which to me just seems so obviously unbiblical. I mean, if you just look at how God relates to his people in the Old Testament, God seems to think that punishment and consequences work well.
Yeah.
As the father of Israel, he allows natural consequences to come sometimes and gets out of the way of those. And then sometimes he uses punishment to teach. And so from a Christian perspective, you hear this stuff and I just think, oh, they don't realize they've adopted a secular worldview and rejected the way that God has instructed us how to teach our children, but also how God has modeled that for us too.
Yeah, and you don't even need a Bible really to know that consequences and punishments do in fact work. I mean, not 100% of the time, but if you make something illegal, yes, there are going to be people that still do it, but it's going to deter a lot of people because they don't want to go to jail. They don't want to get pulled over by the cop. There's going to be a deterrent if there is a consequence that actually is followed through on and enacted. And it's so interesting.
Alisa,
yeah.
I think you just said something that's so important, I think, to pause. You said it doesn't work 100% of the time. I think that's one thing that a lot of gentle parenting capitalizes on,
Okay.
is that there are they can point to plenty of examples when punishment or a consequence did not work. And then therefore that view then is deficient. Having consequences doesn't work
Right.
all the time. And so there's this idea, and again, I think it's tied in with, if you have a view that children are not inherently sinful, but that they are essentially good inside, well, then if you create the right environment, if you meet all of those needs, what's going to happen is this kid's going to blossom, and they
Right.
are going to turn into this this little individual that you will relate perfectly with, and it will be happily ever after. And that is what you, with a lot of influencers, that's just what you hear, even though they're not going to say that. You hear that, like, here's the scenario, do this, and then it will all be good. But we know, and there's lots of examples out there as well, gentle parenting techniques do not work all the time.
I was just going to say that. I'm like, yeah, okay, so if this doesn't work some of the time, and I feel like I'm sticking my hand into a hornet's nest by saying this, but gentle parenting, like no consequence, no punishment will not work 100% of the time, right?
Yeah. And now that we're into this kind of gentle parenting experiment for a while now, we've seen kids who have kind of grown up with this approach. And so there's just some observational data we have, and a lot of parents that we hear from will say, or older folks or teachers will, just looking at it anecdotally, there's so many voices out there going, hey, this is not working. We're seeing the results with these kids who are now out of control. They haven't learned any self-control. They haven't learned how to curb their own bad behavior. And, you're at schools, we're talking to teachers who are saying, when we have a certain kid who's, behaviorally, they're out of whack, they're not cooperating, instead of dealing with that kid. I mean, a teacher just recently told us what she has to do is, if this kid's out of control and will go around the class, maybe grabbing stuff off the shelves or the bookshelves and throwing stuff around, instead of dealing with the kid, she's got to take out all of the other students from the class, and they got to go on a walk, or she's got to distract them while then other administrators come in to try and deal with this child, and they won't give consequences. In fact, one of the times after a fit, the kid came back with a lollipop from the, like the principal's office. And and so you're just seeing lots of examples of it not working, a lot of testimony that it's not working. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids who have been gentle parented are turning out to be very they're unpleasant to be around.
Yeah.
And they're having a difficult time learning how to interact with other human beings.
They're actually miserable.
And they're miserable. So just to highlight, we're not going to say that consequences work all the time, but clearly we see gentle parenting doesn't work all the time, and the question is, should we expect anything to work all the time when we're actually dealing with little sinners? And that, I think that gets us to this really important point in all of this, is that we have to have a proper Christian anthropology, right? We have to have a proper view of what it means to be a human being. And before we even start this whole idea of kind of figuring out how do we discipline our kids and what's the best, we've got to know, what does it mean to be human? And that's, gentle parenting goes off the rails right from the beginning, because it does not capture what it means to be human.
Okay, friends, I want to tell you about a supplement company that I have come to genuinely love. They're called We Heart Nutrition. They're a family-owned company that creates research-backed, highly bioavailable supplements that don't have unnecessary fillers, artificial ingredients, or shortcuts. And what really sets them apart is that they donate 10% of every single sale to pregnancy resource centers all across the U.S., and they've donated over $1 million so far, which is so amazing. Two of my personal favorites is their magnesium glycinate. I take this every single night. It's 100% magnesium glycinate. There's no hidden oxide blends. I love it for sleep. It supports stress levels, muscle relaxation, doesn't upset my stomach. Another supplement I love from We Heart Nutrition is Wholesome Balance. A while back, I did a bunch of research to see what kinds of supplements would help some of my perimenopausal symptoms, and almost every single one of the things I found is in Wholesome Balance. So if you deal with some of those things, or maybe just mood swings and period cramps, this one is life-changing. It's designed to support hormone imbalance, stress response, and cycle symptoms. And this is why so many women are obsessed with it, and it keeps selling out. So if you're not sure where to start, they have a quick 30-second quiz that gives you personalized picks based on your life stage. So go to weheartnutrition.com, take the quiz, and use the code Alisa for 20% off your first order. Again, that's weheartnutrition.com. Use my code Alisa for 20% off your first order. Yeah, it's like it's built on a faulty theological premise. And when you were talking about how it sort of approaches the child not like they're a sinner, but more like they have some sort of if it's a trauma or some sort of a disease that needs to be cured, it gets the diagnosis of the actual problem wrong. And one of the secular examples of somebody putting their finger on this, I'm sure you guys have read Abigail Schreier's book, Bad Therapy. If anybody hasn't read that, you really need to read it. And it's from a secular perspective, but she was sort of putting her finger on a similar thing that when everything is pathologized, then you end up with people just kind of behaving out of control and ruminating on bad things. And then if you bring that into the Christian perspective, of course, we know that what is wrong, the actual beginning diagnosis needs to be that the problem is sin. And of course, there can be things that are pathologies. There can be mental illnesses and traumas, and all of those things can play in. But ultimately, at the core, we have to begin with, like you said, Brett, a proper anthropology to understand what it actually means to be human. And of course, the Christian worldview explains that as this super sophisticated sentence that you are a sinner, right? We're sinners, we all are, and it's not going to be perfect. So how prevalent is this in our culture? I mean, I see it everywhere. I think, okay, let me frame this question a little bit with more nuance here. I know it's prevalent, but do you think that it's so prevalent because it's an overreaction to more of like punishment culture that some people grew up in, where there was no understanding, there was no empathy, there was no just consideration for the kids' feelings. Kids are to be seen and not heard, that sort of thing. And then there's like this overcorrection to say, well, that didn't work, so we're going to do this other thing here on the other side.
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, I do think the human tendency is to think that we will do it better than the people before us. It does seem like we all kind of have that chronological snobbery that C.S. Lewis talks about, where you kind of look at past generations and think like, wow, they really had it wrong. You see all their blind spots really clearly. We don't always see our own blind spots, but yeah, for sure there can be this reaction from like Little House on the Prairie times, where kids had to sit at the table and they couldn't speak unless they were spoken to. And again, this is where I think the Christian worldview solves that problem, because the Christian view gives two aspects of humanity that help us to see our children properly. And the one is, yes, that we are rebellious. We are all going to rebel. And so as parents, we should have this expectation. Our kids are going to rebel. It's not actually personal. It's what we do as humans. And if we self-reflect at all, we know, oh yeah, I struggle with that too. I don't actually love being under authority all the time. But then the second aspect of human beings that helps us as parents to love our children well is that we are unique and made in God's image. And so therefore our children are deserving of dignity and respect. And it's good for us to, as we love them, to understand them as humans, but also uniquely how God's made them. And so if they do struggle in something, we don't beat them over the head with it, but we want to help them grow in it. And so it's both of those things, I think, that actually brings about a healthy view of the child. And really the Christian worldview is the only one that gives us that, because you think about this idea that we're born good inside. Dr. Becky talks about this all the time. This is actually an old idea. Always think of like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and how it was, we're born good. It's just the environment around us that makes us bad. And this comes out in gentle parenting, and it comes out towards especially mom, but mom and dad, with major guilt of if your child is behaving badly, it's like Brett said, some unmet need. And who's supposed to fill those needs? The parents. And so if your kid's hitting another kid at the park, it's probably because you as a parent aren't helping them with some unmet need that they have. Of course, the reality is our kids do have unmet needs, and we ultimately can't fulfill all of those. This is why we point them to God all the time if we're wise. And so the holding these ideas about who we are as human beings helps us to be the kind of parents we're supposed to be, and helps us not to even take the weight on, for example, that we're supposed to meet every need our child has.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times when it comes to like what influences us to, adopt certain ideas, or why are there certain trends in the culture, there's usually multiple streams that are running into something like this. And so I think there used to be more of a tolerance in the culture for authoritarian parenting that was harsher. And there are legitimate, the stories of abuse that people were abused, or they were treated very harshly by their parents. And so there is some of that is a reaction to that, and that's where I'm much more sympathetic to those individuals who they had that bad experience with their own parents, and they want to reform that for their own kids. And that is noble. And I think we need to highlight that. Like, that is a noble desire, but then that could often swing the pendulum one way. Then you have secular views that have become more dominant in, the culture. And so shifting from a view as the human being as a sinful kind of creature to now, fundamentally good. I think that plays into this. Then I think you have the ideas of critical theory that have entered into the parent-child relationship. And you think about how we talk about parents and children now, and we try to move away from any kind of language of hierarchy or obligation, or the child is to obey the parent, right? These are, you're given modern ideas, critical theory ideas, you're talking about the possibility of a perpetrator, the parent, and the victim, the child. And so we even conceive of the parent-child relationship in terms of oppressor and oppressed. And you see this in the language of some of these gentle parenters. And so there's these kind of multiple streams. I think the perfect storm that gets us to this place where then we embrace these really bad ideas. And I think so for Christians, one thing we have to remember, and I think so, we're going to say things like, hey, we start with Scripture, right? Scripture is the foundation. And that's absolutely true. But I want us to drill down deeper into that and realize when we say Scripture is the Word of God, that it's authoritative, that it's true, what we're saying, we need to think through the implications. Scripture gives us a factually accurate account of reality. Just like the scientists may point to a particular biology book or a neuroscience book and says this is a description of reality, or that would be implied. We need to come to the table with that same view with the scriptures. The Bible is going to give us a factually accurate account of reality. So when it talks about parents and children and their relationship and obligations and all this, it's describing reality as it is. And this is why we start with theology, not therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's been turned on its head, where now we've tried to take these, therapy that is just so influential in the culture, and we try to add some theology on it, but we start with the therapy instead of starting with the theology.
And
Boy,
you
that's such a
asked,
good point.
Alisa. Oh, sorry. And you asked, I didn't answer that, how prevalent it is in the culture. So depending on the study you look at, it's about 75% of millennial parents say they practice gentle parenting. So this is prevalent. And so maybe a gen like our generation, Gen X, and maybe boomers who are saying, is this really an issue? Like, do people really think this stuff? And the answer is absolutely yes. Not only do they believe this stuff, they are following it, and this is how they're raising their kids. And so we need to, even if we aren't practicing gentle parenting, we need to care about it, because probably the vast majority of parents in your church are practicing gentle parenting.
Jumping in to tell you about our next sponsor, which is Range Leather. I love a really well-made leather purse, a leather bag, a leather wallet, and Range Leather really stands apart because every product they craft in their Laramie, Wyoming workshop is built to last a lifetime, just like the values we hold dear. This is a Christian-owned company. They have all sorts of things, from beautiful leather tote bags to wallets to belts to jewelry to cute trucker hats with leather patches to full-grain Horween leather Apple watch bands. So there are so many different things you can choose from. I love my clutch that I take with me every day that fits my wallet, some credit cards, some cash, a lipstick. It's perfect. But this past Sunday, I wanted to bring a few more things to church, like my Bible and some lotions and some other things that I just wanted to keep with me. And my beautiful tote bag was so perfect for that. And it's just my style with different options of colors. And I love that all of the products I have from Range Leather wear in and not out. And they have a lifetime guarantee. This is definitely something you are going to want to check out. Go to rangeleather.com today and use my code Alisa for 15% off. Again, that's rangeleather.com. Use my code Alisa. Yeah, because there's Christian versions of this, right? There are lots of influencers and platforms out there that are advocating for essentially the same thing, but with some Bible verses put on top of it and some Christian veneer. And you mentioned progressive theology, and I'm already seeing some themes emerge here. Obviously, the denial of human sinfulness would be one overlap. The critical theory piece of the puzzle would be another one. What else is there that would overlap with gentle parenting and progress? It almost seems like it's motivated from progressive theology in many ways.
Well, yeah, because I think one of the big issues in gentle parenting is authority. Brett kind of touched on that, but who is the authority? And that's the question, that progressive Christians wrestle. Is the Bible the authority? No, they've moved away from that. And I would say in gentle parenting, the answer for who's the authority is the child and their feelings. And as Christians, we can never move to the person being the authority and their feelings. And I think it's especially negligent to let the child in your home be the authority for how things are going to go. First of all, I think the reason children are miserable with this style of parenting is because that is a weight that children cannot carry.
Right.
They can't carry the weight of the mood of the family. They can't carry the weight of decisions about when bedtime is and what we should eat for dinner and these kind of practical things that play out. And children can't, they need guidance in this, but instead the authority is moved off the parent. That's oppressive to think that you know what's best for your child when you haven't even asked your 3-year-old what they want. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are suggested. And that's why it's so persuasive how they do it, because they'll have an Instagram video that will say, do you want to be told when to go to bed? Why do you do that to your child? And Sarah Ockwell Smith, who wrote the Gentle Parenting book, talks about this a lot. And kind of living by this principle. This is a principle she says we should live by. If you don't want it done to you, why would you do it to your child?
Wow.
And so it's kind of taking Jesus's teaching, treat others the way you want to be treated. And it turns it, though, and you see how manipulative that is, because at first hearing of that, you're like, yeah, why would I do something to my kid that I wouldn't want to be done to me? But it's like, well, I'm a 49-year-old woman. Hopefully no one has to tell me when to go to bed. Hopefully I've learned enough about my own body to know I need a certain amount of sleep and I should go to bed. 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, even 10-year-olds, they still need this guidance because they don't have the wisdom yet. But this is where it is so manipulative, because there will be some like little seed of truth or kernel that kind of resonates with us, but then it takes us to places that not only I think are not logical, it is not good for the child.
And I think I just want to highlight how subtle some of this messaging is in some of these ideas. And this is why there has been this kind of wooing, I think, of a lot of Christian parents, because there are aspects that do sound good. So Sarah Ockwell Smith, she put online a chart and she contrasts mainstream parenting with gentle parenting. And so she says, I'll just highlight a couple of these. She says routines, this is mainstream parenting, routines set by parents or parenting, quote, experts. Versus gentle parenting, what you do is there are natural rhythms of the child observed and followed. Now, just pause and think about that. That really sounds wonderful. I mean, doesn't it? The natural rhythms of the child are observed and then they are followed, Yeah, versus, hey, the routine set by the strict parenting expert who, is imposing this. And that's the contrast. Now, again, that's really subtle. And, but what that does is you see how that very subtly also undermines parental authority. As if you think you think you're the expert, you think no, just observe the child's, natural rhythms. Or here's a second one. Children should learn respect for their parents ASAP.
That's the bad.
That's mainstream parenting. Children should learn respect for their parents ASAP. And even adding that ASAP gives it a little bit of negativity, right? And of course, who is it even reasonable to have an expectation that your kid's going to respect you ASAP? Of course not. So instead, here's the gentle parenting approach. Parent respects the child, leading the child to respect the parent. Oh, that sounds wonderful. If I just show the respect to the child, then I'll be leading them that way, and then they'll respect me. And again, there you see this subtle undermining of authority, but also I would argue as something that's going to lead to a lot of frustration, because you've got a sinner who there's plenty of examples of a kid not respecting the parent. And I'm just thinking of, these times when you see kids at the playground or middle schoolers or high schoolers talking to their parents being very respectful, and the kid responds with disrespect. Why is that? Well, because this doesn't acknowledge what a human being really is. So those are just, I highlight that because there's subtle ways to undermine the authority of the parent. And this is when we go back to scripture, it's very clear. There is a hierarchical structure that God has built in. He's designed it into the fabric of the universe, into the fabric of family, that a parent is in a place of authority over a child. Now, again, that doesn't mean we just get to go with authoritarian parenting. It's just my way, the highway. I'm going to use harsh means and all that. Of course not. But what we have to do is recapture the idea of some authority.
Mhm.
And in gentle parenting subtly tries to erode that.
Okay. Well, there's a lot there, and we're going to actually now look at a couple of videos and a couple of graphics that are promoting the ideas of gentle parenting. And I'm just very curious to get your guys' thoughts on this, because this is the kind of thing that everybody's just interacting with all day long on their social media news feeds. So we'll go to this first one here.
Sometimes I think we ask more of our children than we do of anyone else. We tell them to stop crying when we would never say that to an adult. We make bedtime at the exact same time every day when we let our own bodies tell us how much sleep we need. We tell them to be alone in their room for quiet time or bedtime when we always have our partner for company. I wonder if some of the hurt and loneliness we experienced growing up wasn't because our parents didn't see us as children, but because they didn't really see us at all.
Wow.
Ouch.
I mean, the first thing I thought about when she said, you don't want somebody to tell you to stop crying. Well, unlike a toddler, I'm not crying all the time to begin with, But what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's one of the things that can be appealing, is that but it's false. It's a false parallel. You're taking a child and putting them on the same level of an adult.
Yeah.
And my first thought was, well, let me give some counterexamples. Okay, every time I don't get my way, I don't cry, right? I don't throw a fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got two things that are not, they're apples and oranges.
Well,
when
and
you're
if I
talking
am
about
doing that, if I am crying every time I don't get my own way, I definitely want somebody to tell me to stop crying. They should. They should tell me to stop
Exactly.
crying.
That's right.
Have you tried Adele Natural Cosmetics yet? Well, Adele is a Christian-founded, family-owned company that creates handcrafted, high-end cosmetics and skincare that are safe and clean and nourishing. They've just come out with some new packaging, which is so beautiful and luxurious. I love so many of their products. They have a great oil cleanser that just gets all the makeup off. They have clean, non-toxic makeup and skincare made with carefully selected natural ingredients. Guys, their color cosmetics are so beautiful. I wear their lipsticks all the time. Their eyeshadows are just gorgeous. And they have a complimentary color matching service to help you find the perfect foundation shade, which can be challenging when you're shopping online. So check them out today. I recommend starting with something like their bronzing stick and their glow stick. Their glow stick is so beautiful. I've talked about it a bunch on this podcast, but it just gives you kind of this lit from within glow that doesn't look glittery or way too shimmery. Go to Adele Natural Cosmetics today. That's spelled ADEL, naturalcosmetics.com, and use my code Alisa for 25% first-time orders. Again, that's AdeleNaturalCosmetics.com. Use my code Alisa.
That's right. And so, but it sets this up. And here's a quick video. And if you don't slow it down and do what we're doing right now, you can just kind of easily, on the surface, this sounds really, really good. Yeah, a child should be treated with respect. And we would agree a child should be treated with respect, but a child should also be seen properly as a child with the difficulties, the struggles, the failures, the immaturities that come with being a child.
Yeah, you think about the packaging of that video. First of all, I mean, what a cute kid, right? And he's like watering flowers, and you're looking at and you think about like a mom who is on Instagram and she's exhausted and she's had a bad day with her kids, and then you watch that video and you're like, see, I want that. I want like peaceful toddler and watering flowers and so the packaging is so persuasive because it makes you think, well, see, I don't have that all the time. How do I get that? Well, follow this lady's advice and you'll get it, right? Also, too, that one, I mean, it ends with kind of a ouch to parents, right? Because she thinks, or she ends it with saying, I think my parents didn't see me at all. I mean, wow, that's quite an indictment to our parents. But I think it does tap into this. All of us know our parents didn't do things perfectly, right? We could all say, yeah, my mom kind of lost it on me this time, or, my dad did this. And we all have stuff and ways that our parents hurt us. And so that taps into that. Well, you were kind of a victim of your parents. So don't victimize your kid. What parent is not going to be pulled in by that? This promise of like, hey, if you do this stuff, you're going to raise an emotionally healthy kid and they're not going to have all the baggage you have. So again, it goes to the problem of sin and humanity and over promises, because the truth is we are all going to hurt our children. Brett and I have 5 kids. We have hurt our children. But the truth is our children have hurt us too, because that's the nature of human relationship. And so what a parent has to do and grow in is, yes, learning when you do hurt your children that you apologize and you come and ask for forgiveness. And hopefully you're teaching your children to do the same thing when they hurt people, like at the park. But it just taps into this, you're a victim of your parents. And so don't victimize your kid. The truth is, it's impossible. We're going to hurt each other. That's what we do in a family. Brett and I hurt each other all the time. We hurt our kids. So there's no like real solution to that other than we learn repentance. We learn forgiveness. Who do we learn that from? We learn it from Jesus, first and foremost. He models all of this for us. And so he's our model. And yeah, if your parents hurt you deeply, if you were abused, if you grew up in an authoritarian home where you weren't seen or valued as a child, you do need to work through that. But my encouragement would be, don't swing the pendulum the other way and misdiagnose what your children actually need from you.
When you think about this really taps into some of the guilt that we experience as parents. And again, I don't think a gentle parent or influencer is going to, explicitly say this, but when you kind of lay out these scenarios where this is harmful to the kid, and of course we don't want to be, we don't want to hurt our kid, but here's the path forward. You can tap into the guilt of moms and dads who, and what you end up doing though, because this is impossible. This is almost like, in one sense, there's like a kind of a works-based righteousness here, like or a legalism that you can be a perfect parent if you just do these things. If you're empathetic, if you kind of meet their unmet needs, then you will raise this child to a point where there will be no more conflict and it'll be utopia, and parenting utopia and perfection. Oh my gosh. And you can just see how that would just heap guilt upon parents who are failing at this, because we're, as Erin said, we're sinners too. But then also you end up removing these other beautiful Christian concepts and Christian ideas and our theology that are such an important part of a family's life. The forgiveness, the confession of sin, right? I mean, there's just no talk in gentle parenting of a child acknowledging their sinfulness, doing something wrong, and then confessing that to a parent and asking for forgiveness. There's just none of that.
Man, everything you guys are talking about right now is making me think of the culture that we see within the deconstruction movement in particular, but even in broader culture as well, of adult children cutting off their parents. Do you think there's a relationship between gentle parenting and particularly the point of not really teaching about sin and repentance? And even from a secular perspective, hey, you need to go apologize. You did something wrong. Is there a connection there? What's the relationship?
Oh, I think no question, because this is what this individualistic, what is Carl Trueman in
Expressive individualism.
Expressive individualism. This is in every area, right? It's in deconstruction. It's in every area of culture. And so it is definitely seeped into parenting. And if your words like boundaries, one of the values of gentle parenting, when you look up boundaries, a lot of times boundaries isn't like the healthy learning how to respect one another and recognizing you bring things to the table that aren't wonderful, and so does whoever the relationship you have with your parent, a sibling, a friend, whoever. But the boundary ends up being if someone makes you feel bad or if someone does something that you don't like, that can be a time to put down a boundary. And because there's no language that talks about honoring and respecting your parents just because they're your parent. Because, see, when you take away, there's no like parent child hierarchy. And when you take that away, there is no, well, I honor my mom because she's my mom. And I realize my mom, yeah, she did some things wrong and she hurt me when I was a kid growing up. But the truth is, I hurt my mom too. And I'm instructed by God to honor my mom and my dad. And now honoring can look different depending on the relationship. And again, a lot of times in people's mind, they go instantly to, well, I know someone whose parent is abusive. Okay, so honoring the parent in that circumstance might look different. For example, we have one of our really good friends. His mom was abusive and addicted to drugs, and he had a really tough upbringing. And he's actually, because his mom is still addicted to drugs, he's had to not have his kids have a relationship with her. It breaks his heart, but the way he honors his mom is by being an incredible dad to his kids. And as he's, he came to the Lord later in life, and so he's worked on forgiving his mom. And that's part of honoring her too. So it might look different than how I honor my parents. I grew up in a healthy home, and in my family, we just hurt each other in all the normal ways that families hurt each other. So it's going to look different, right? I take my mom out to tea on her birthday. That's honoring her. He's not going to be able to do that. But the principle of honoring your parents is one that is not only talked about in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament too. And so, but this is completely washed away in gentle parenting. And as a Christian, that should cause you some pause if you think this is the parenting style you want to do.
Yeah, I think the expressive individualism is poisonous to our culture as a whole. It seeps into the church. And so, this fundamental idea that now authority is within me. I am the primary authority on all things, and it's my thoughts, my desires, my feelings that dictate the truth. I find my truth. I live out that truth. And I also have this expectation that everyone around me is going to affirm me in whatever it is I do. You can see how that's going to set us up for this kind of situation where now to be true to yourself, to live your authentic self means you have to cut out the quote unquote toxic people in your in your life. And that's often going to be parents, because think about it. Parents are the ones that love you the most. Generally speaking, this is going to be the case, that parents are going to be most invested in that child more so than anyone else. And so there's going to be typically a closeness in the relationship, but also a care to where the parent will try to speak the truth out of love whenever, they maybe see their kid going astray or they disagree with them. But we can't even acknowledge that. It's just that, hey, if they're not affirming me, well, then they're toxic by definition.
Yeah.
And it just turns this whole thing on its head. And if you think about it, if the source of authority now is internal to me, it's me, I'm the authority, then that means there's who do I have obligations to? And this is where you see in our culture, right? The language of obligation has just completely dropped off.
Mhm.
But if you think about the nature of obligations, I mean, what is the primary command we see in the New Testament to children? It's children, obey your parents. Now, when there's a command given by the appropriate authority, there's a corresponding obligation. And so God has given this command to children, obey your parents. And so children have an obligation, not just to the parent, but to God himself to obey and honor their child. When the command creates a corresponding obligation. And guess what? Those obligations exist objectively outside of you or me, outside of my thoughts, outside of what I agree with or not. And when you erase that, then you get the situation that we're in, and we can easily cut one another off now, no matter whether or not your parents invested, their work and time and money and effort and love for 25 years. You can wipe it away like that.
Yeah, man. And I think that one of the things I often think about, actually with some compassion, is all of the people that are promoting these ideas and doing these things are having kids. And one day there's going to be a reckoning, I think, for all of this. And they might be reaping what they sow. And that makes me sad to say, but that was all so very well put. We've got time for one more video. Let's watch this one, and then we'll land the plane here.
I just had the smoothest, best morning with my kids before they went to school. And I want to tell you exactly what I did to make that happen. I did a strategy I call doing nothing. Okay, let me explain how this works though. So first my daughter came out and she was complaining about breakfast. Oh, waffles, I hate waffles. Now, my daughter always likes waffles, but normally I would really take the bait. I would say, you love waffles. Come on. You've had waffles the last 18 mornings. Instead, today, I chose to do nothing. She complained and I did this back. That's it. And things de-escalated. Now my son came out a few minutes later and said, you promised me you would wash my sweatshirt. It's still dirty. Now, between you and me, he never even asked me to wash his sweatshirt. And normally I would say something like that back. You never asked me. That never happened. And things would escalate. Today, I chose to do nothing. I think I took a deep breath. Looked at him like I kind of understood how awful it is to want to wear something and have it be dirty. And I think a few moments later, I just said, you wish the sweatshirt was clean. And then a moment after that, he just got out a different sweatshirt. We had the smoothest morning because instead of engaging in a power struggle or taking my kids' words too literally, I just chose to do nothing. Highly recommend you try that.
Well, this is where I have so much to say about this video. And for those who don't know, this video is Dr. Becky. She's the author of Good Inside, millions of followers. She does parenting workshops and all kinds of things. Very influential in this space. She doesn't call herself a gentle parenter, just to be clear, but her ideas and views just line up right with this philosophy. So that's where sometimes people won't use the title gentle parenter, but if you look at their ideas, it matches up. I mean, there's a lot of problems with the advice she's getting. First of all, from a Christian worldview, when our children, the parents become the punching bag of the kids. Do you see that in that scenario?
Yeah.
The kids are just allowed to say whatever they want to mom. So think about it. She got up early and made her kids waffles for breakfast. And the response of her daughter is ungratefulness. And what's the advice to do? Say nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Say nothing to ungratefulness. I would say, Mom, no, this is when you say, hey, sweetheart, I woke up early to make you breakfast so that you could go to school without an empty stomach. This is not how you respond to people who do nice things for you. So instead, I want you to, when I make stuff for you, or when people do stuff for you, I want you to start with, oh, thank you, Mom. Mm-hmm. And thank you, teacher. Thank you, Grandma. This is not how we respond to people who do nice things for us. And if this is a pattern, and you've warned them about this, I would say that this might be time for a consequence. If this is something that they keep doing, I would say, and now you don't get the waffles. So you're on your own. You have 5 minutes to figure out breakfast for yourself, and you no longer can have the waffles. This is what I would do. The little boy who comes down and his sweatshirt's not clean, I mean, realistically, I would say to them, again, mom's just the punching bag, right? She gets blamed for everything. And so instead of saying, did you tell me you needed it cleaned? This is when, as a mom, I would say, okay, this is time now for you to do your own laundry. And frankly, a kid who can articulate that they needed a sweatshirt clean can articulate and probably push some buttons on a machine. I mean, let's be honest, doing laundry is super easy in 2026. It is not Little House on the Prairie time where a laundry was like a whole day of like scrubbing and squeezing. We have machines that do it for us, and you push buttons. So I know with our kids, when they started these things where it's like, oh, mom, my skirt, I wanted to wear it. It's not clean. I would say, okay, it's time for you to do your own laundry then. Because if you need certain things at a certain day, that's on you.
Yeah.
And so you got to do that. But so instead, she's just teaching this. They get to act however they want. There's no correction. Notice that. There's no addressing poor treatment of mom. And then this is again where I go back to how does this work on real kids in real life, training them for real life situations.
Yes.
So then she sends her two kids to school, and then does she tell the teacher, hey teacher, by the way, I'm trying this strategy. I want you to do it too. When my daughter's rude, can you just do nothing and ignore it and let it blow? Teacher's going to be like, I have 35 kids. This is not something I can do.
This is why teachers are quitting. Teachers are quitting because of this kind of stuff.
Yes. And it just doesn't teach them for real This daughter grows up, is married, and then she snaps at her husband. So is the mom going to tell the husband, hey, by the way, I raised her to, when she talks mean, if you just ignore it, say nothing, it'll blow over eventually. I mean, good luck having her friends and other people do this kind of thing. This just does not work if you want to have children who not only learn how to flourish in society and in relationships. This is raising our kids to struggle in relationships for the rest of their life.
This is one thing I think is really important to narrate for parents, because it's not just, hey, I want my kid to behave. I want them to do what I say, or I don't want them to disrespect me. And this is where gentle parenters will turn it on kind of authoritative parenting and be like, well, that's, it's about you. No, actually, we do these things because it is actually right to respect a parent, but also all these things are done for the good of the child as well, and to see them flourish. Because if you take her approach and extrapolate it over the life of a kid, what you'll get is a monster. And no one's going to want to be around that kid. And you are going to set them up for failure in their relationships. You're going to set them up for failure in their work environment, having a relationship with the boss. You're going to set them up for failure in a marriage relationship. And they're going to reap so much damage. And so we God's design for kids to learn to obey their parents, develop habits of, and virtue, develop character, develop self-control, the fruits of the Spirit, these kinds of things, is ultimately for the good of the kid as well as for the good of those around them. And so I think helping people see, like, okay, even if everything she said was absolutely true, which sometimes I'm a little skeptical of all these kind of stories that the gentle parenters give, because it's like, well, I know real kids, I know real human beings and how they, how they respond. But even if it were the case, even if she got the result she wanted in that short term, I would argue in the long term, she's shooting herself in the foot, and she's going to make it really hard for those kids in life.
Well, and frankly, it's I don't know, maybe I'll get some hate for this, but it's lazy. Sometimes it's just easier to do nothing. Your kid says a rude comment, just, I don't have the energy to correct that. So yeah, doing nothing's a lot easier, but it sets your kid up, like you mentioned, Erin, to go over to a friend's house and talk that way to their parent, because that's what they think an appropriate interaction with an adult is. So I think
I think you're right. Yeah. And I'll just add to Alisa, and I know we all can relate to this as parents. When you let your children treat you poorly and you ignore it, in the short term, it is easier. In the long term, you build up a lot of resentment to your kid. And this is where I think we underestimate our ability to dislike our own children. We love our kids, but we can get to a place where we really don't like them. And that is not a place you want to go as a parent. You want to teach your kids to treat you properly, because that fosters healthy relationship with you. And so this is why these scenarios, it's like every time they have a parent respond, which they'll set up as like traditional parenting, it's this false dichotomy, because it's either do what she does or bite your kid's head off and be a total jerk. And you don't have to respond that way. You can respond the way I suggested, where you confront them and say, this is not how you treat people. But if you do blow up at your kids, if you find yourself blowing up at your kids, it might be because you're not handling things when you need to, and your anger is building up and building up and building up. And then eventually we kind of explode on your kids, and that's sin. And then you have to ask for forgiveness. We're not allowed that. Nowhere in Scripture are we instructed, because we're authority over our kids, are we given the allowance to just treat them however we want. That's sinful. And so if you explode on your kids, you need to apologize. And so the scenarios oftentimes are a parent sinning against the child, screaming at them, blowing up at them. And I would say, well, wait, that's not what I do. That's not what I do to I don't gentle parent, but I don't bite my kid's head off every time they do something. And so that's the false dichotomy in these videos. Again, as moms are scrolling, and I do want to say the biggest audience for gentle parenting is moms. This appeals a lot to mothers, because moms we are very good at nurturing and empathizing, and this is so critical, right? When our kids are little, if they don't attach to their mom, you will have problems for a lifetime if you had problems attaching to your mom, in particular when you're very little. And so this is a very good God-given thing. But moms, we have to transition as our kids transition. And so this gentle parenting, it appeals to moms, and a lot of things I've seen have directly said, if your husband or partner doesn't agree with you on this, they probably need to go to therapy and learn this. Because I think a lot of fathers intuitively will oftentimes know, no, the kid needs to be pushed in this. We don't need to coddle this. And so it kind of shuts down dad and any kind of influence that a lot of times dads are intuitive this way. When it comes time to push kids, a lot of times it's dad going, no, you need to get up and try again. Or no, you've been told to do this chore. Quit complaining, go do it.
Yeah, stop crying.
A lot of times dads will, stop crying. I mean, a lot of times dad's the one that's like, shake it off, let's go.
Yeah.
And we need that, don't we? So yeah, a lot of problems with the advice.
Okay, I know people are listening and they're thinking, I want so much more. And I know you guys have an ebook that has just come out. So let us know where people can get that. Tell us a little bit about your ministry and how people can connect with you.
Yeah, so our ministry is Maven, and the word Maven just refers to someone who's knowledgeable in a field or a study, and then seeks to pass that on to other people. And that's what we want to be for the next generation, is mavens of Christian truth, the Christian worldview. And so you can go to our website, maventruth.com, and find everything Maven there. We will have a banner on the website that you can click on for the Gentle Parenting ebook. And MavenTruth.com will be the place to go to find all of the resources that Maven offers.
All right. Well, I want to thank my guests, Brett and Erin Kunkle. Again, check out Maven Truth, such a great ministry. And let's remember, as we pursue Christ, to keep a sharp mind, a soft heart, and thick skin. We'll see you next time.
So